like it's possible that like these different political systems we were talking about, that they're like useful tools in different situations, that they make sense in moderation, but that none is like the ideal system.
Mm. Yeah, that's fascinating.
That's a great point.
Democracy in moderation.
And actually, I can connect the dots a little bit more there. I think I would say that
Wow.
one of the things that humanity is sort of going toward, like the trajectory of humanity, is we're becoming larger and more organized collective consciousnesses. We're kind of like companies and societies and clubs and countries are forms of collective consciousness or a collective organism. And basically the government of a or at least the protocols that run a society are kind of like the ego in your brain. Like your brain is a bunch of cells, and they're all just it's mostly a decentralized system, mostly just cells firing, and mostly just kind of this agarist type thing that's going on in your brain. But you've got this ego, which is a narrative, right? It's a story of what you're doing and why you're doing it, and things that you'd like to achieve. And so the government is kind of that, but for society instead of for your brain. And basically,
that's fascinating. Well,
yeah.
the government wouldn't be the story. The story would be nationalism and the religion. It would be that would be because the government is simply a means by which to reach consensus upon the rules, but the rules are defined by the culture and what individuals are willing to fight for. Really, really hard to get other people to play with.
The
Right?
government
So
is kind of like this thing that's like, oh, well, we have too much X, and so we're going to do Y.
but the government is people. Like the government is made of people. This is something that I get frustrated with libertarians and anarchists all the time. It's like the free market is individuals making choices, and the government is individuals making choices. Everything is individuals making choices. But obviously, there's some. A lot of the choices that individuals make, they rhyme with each other, and they're made in order to rhyme with each other. And so it's like it's sort of like a symphony of co-creation of society or something like that. But the narrative is it's who are we, what do we stand for, what do we care about, what are we willing to die for, basically. And
Right.
you make it hard line enough,
Yeah.
That's
What
a
are
really
our
good point,
values?
Juan. I think that's lost on people a lot of times, that in a manner of thinking, there is no government. The government doesn't exist. It's just people doing things, right? There's no free market. It's just individuals.
And if you look at it, yeah, if you look at it from
Yeah.
economics perspective, there is kind of like there is such a thing as an imbalance of incentives where you have a small group of people that have sort of let's say specialized knowledge and specialized sort of relationship access to a particular network, right, or a network effect. Like the people that work inside Facebook and know how it works and are already proven that they know how to work it. And there's people that are stuck with the effects of leveraging, like writing this network effect, which is everybody else. We're just on Facebook because everybody's on Facebook. And so you kind of have to be on Facebook in order to talk to people because now you talk to them on Facebook. And the difficulty of leaving and changing, it takes a lot of collective effort to break that network effect, whereas it's very easy for the people in the niche kind of influence to change rules and modify people's behavior at scale. And that's like an economics question of the costs of, like, the economics of power. So yeah, so that's the one exception to whatever we were talking about. That took way too much brain power for me to keep the context. But
Do y'all feel like the government might be? So I had a friend, actually. He wasn't particularly spiritual, and he definitely wasn't a libertarian. But years ago, he was like, "Man, I kind of feel like the government is this entity. Like it's a thing." So it, directly contradictory to what we were just saying. Sure, the government, it's just individuals, but in another sense, it's like has a life of its own, almost like it's its own, in a spiritual sense, it's almost its own entity. It has its own consciousness that's composed of the collective, which is the individuals, and together there's like this conscious entity that we call government.
Emergent consciousness
Yeah.
from that comes out of the individual. Just like your brain is a consciousness. It's a single consciousness, but it's actually just a decentralized network of
cells. Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. Chris and I were talking about this a while back, and we went. It's fascinating that he sees it as like that as well. Go ahead.
But yeah, so
I don't know. Like the government has a bit of a different relationship in time than relationship with time than individuals do. Because like the government, it accumulates these laws that are like very old. A lot of them. It's based on a system that's very old, like liberal democracy. It's hundreds of years old, and the momentum of where the government's moving is based on decisions that were made many governments ago when there was a different public that chose that government. So in a way, it's like it's not immediately responsive to like the will of the people. Like it's got like a bit of a time lapse thing going on.
There's a lag.
Yeah, it is
I like that.
Yeah, it is the carcass of our ancestors.
well, and I think you can draw a parallel again between that and your brain. Your brain has emotions, right? And emotions are kind of like on a bigger scale. They're kind of like, let's elect Trump, let's elect, Clinton or whatever. It's just like this strange like urge that doesn't have a great logical explanation. It's kind of just like this emotion, right? And there is a motivation for it. The motivation is that collectively, a lot of the individuals in the society are kind of feeling an urge, towards a particular direction. They're just feeling an impetus in a particular direction. They're just feeling like we need to do this.
And I just want to add that
that logical thought.
Go ahead, man.
Because, let's think about this. Is this emotion something that we should listen to, or is it kind of irrational?
Well, and I want to add that, like, just because you make a decision emotionally or intuitively and without having a particular capacity to articulate that, the reasoning or the logic of that, through logic, like just because you're acting emotionally and intuitively doesn't mean that there isn't good reason or logic to your instinct or your intuition.
Mm-hmm.
But it's definitely better if you're consciously aware of the path that you're taking rather than acting based on kind of old structures, right? Because you could argue very much that emotions and intuition and instinct are the carcass of our ancestors. They are the castles that are, millennia of life and survival of the fittest and whatever else you want to add to that equation, co-created, and we're like peak, right? So yeah, that's fascinating.
It feels like our intuitions and our emotions, they tend to guide our actions in the immediate term, right, in the present moment. But we also have this capacity for self-reflection and intellectual discourse and examination. So what I found over the years is that through these intellectual pursuits, I can actually modify my emotions. I can say, wait a second, I felt that emotion in that moment, but I see now how that emotion wasn't useful and maybe it wasn't even correct. I hadn't even analyzed the situation correctly. And so I found that I can use my intellect to modify my emotional state and my intuitive state, just to, in turn, my intuitions inform my intellect about what to examine.
Right.
Absolutely, dude.
Yeah,
and you can even change very stern behavior, like bad habits. You can change them through journaling if you can sort of argument yourself into the new position. I've been testing it personally. I can tell you guys about it later. Go ahead.
Are you doing the Jordan Peterson self-authoring?
Sort of, yeah, sort of something like that. Go ahead, Ariel.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I think it can often move the other way too, or it often does move the other way. Like, if you hold an intellectual position and you like feel some emotion, like you feel unsettled about your beliefs, or you feel very interested in a particular topic in some way, like those emotions can guide like your intellectual searching. And often I think like emotional processing is kind of faster than intellectual processing. So with intellectual processing, you have to go through every stage.
Yep.
Whereas with emotional processing, you're using like heuristics, like shortcuts. So your emotions might be able to tell you like something's not quite right here, when intellectually you can't figure out what it is yet. And I think like on a societal level, it's like Hegel saw it as like these kind of like shifts in society. He saw it as like the movement of the spirit through history. So you get like these like large groups of people, like millions of people who all kind of seem to have the same intuition or the same emotion at a particular time, and that starts like guiding society in a certain way, and no one really understands what it is yet.
That's cool. So
Hegel.
it, that sounds very broad in the terms of like looking at humanity as a singular consciousness. That when humanity has an idea, it appears in many people at the same time. Is that the kind of ideas you're discussing there?
Yeah, that's definitely a big element of it.
Yeah,
So if we
that's
compare,
interesting.
so I definitely want to.
I don't know that I buy this whole like we are one consciousness thing completely, but
Well,
there's some truth to it. Yeah.
so I think
That's not necessarily part.
It's not
So I-
necessarily what?
Go ahead. That's not really what Hegel was
Okay.
saying. He just like saw it as like he just saw it like a society was moving upwards towards like an ideal over time. Like he was a progressivist, and so like the individual minds bring in new ideas that become like instantiated on the societal level through like a process of dialectic.
If we want to connect, like look at the U.S. basically as a sort of consciousness. It's almost like we have two different neural networks which can be a ruling network at any given time, depending on who the public decides to elect. So we've got the Republicans and we've got the Democrats, and so in times of worry,
I enjoy these.
that's this too. Basically, it's almost like having multiple personalities. I mean, basically, the U.S. has two personalities. Okay, and depending on the circumstances, the neural network will select which personality it wants to be the ruling personality, and the other personality just has to sit back and watch. And then 4 years later, there's another selection. Your brain, I think, does a kind of similar thing, except it doesn't take 4 years. It's just instant. Like it just takes in new information, and eventually, there's a tipping point is reached where it's like, oh, I need to switch myself into a different mode. Sort of a fight or flight mode. It's kind of almost what the Republicans are. They're kind of just like, we're scared. We don't know what's going on. We gotta, let's lock down our border and just figure out what's going on. It's kind of like when you're feeling stressed out, you want to just go in a corner and meditate, and you don't want to deal with the outside world. So you want to kind of just make this nice little wall around yourself where nobody can get in. And like, I actually, I watched some videos from Richard Spencer because I wanted to see, what they're saying, and see if people will listen to it. I don't think we have anything to worry from them. But basically, the idea is, let's put a 50-year moratorium on immigration. Let's just have neutral immigration. Like basically, in order to let somebody in, we have to wait for somebody to leave. And that's kind of like when your brain is just like, okay, I just want to meditate. I just want to like go in a corner and just be like,